humble of heart, and my burden is easy, and my yoke is light. Jesus offers these words of consolation that I think so often we long for in my life, in the tumultuous and the difficult moments. I want this to be true. And I read a lot of the commentaries, and to be honest, they feel a little bit like pious platitudes, especially in those moments when I struggled the most with these burdens of life and faith. And and so I really wanted to dig more deeply past most everything that I read in preparation for the Sunday's homily. And and again, I find ourselves drawn to the teachings of love, that we're called to love, and that God is love, and that these burdens of life lived in love are very different than when we live them out of duty. We have many duties that are heavy, um, but shared in love, have the potential of being meaningful and even joyful. I have an example from my own life, probably not very relevant, not even very interesting, but maybe helpful in trying to share my own journey of understanding this. So, more and more recently, I seem to be getting a lot of calls from the hospital next door, Christus, Westover Hills, asking for patients, from the chaplains, asking me to go and anoint patients, visit with patients who are dying, who are scared, who are Catholic. And I've found this very frustrating. This is a confession, I'm not saying I'm right to be frustrated, but I found it very frustrating because Christus is a Catholic hospital system, and they have no priests on their chaplaincy staff. And to be honest, most of their chaplains, almost all of their chaplains, aren't even Catholic. And so their only option usually is to call me. And they're calling me, it feels like sometimes almost as part of their system, right? As a duty, as if I were an employee and I was responsible to these needs. And really, I'm just the neighboring pastor who's willing to help if they don't find somebody more connected with the person who's sick. Um, and and so oftentimes when I get these calls, I feel a deep sense of burden and frustration, as a sense of duty, and a duty that I don't really have time or energy for. And yet, I have never stepped into a room with a family who's struggling, who's grieving, with a patient who's scared, who's about to undergo something that might change their life forever, might bring their life to an end, and spent even 5 minutes with them without love transforming a burden into a privilege, into a place of joy, of meaning, of gratitude that I got to be part of something so intimate and so precious. And that doesn't mean that the next time I get a call, I won't be like, oh, but that love is able to transform, just a little bit of love is able to transform the burdens of duty into value. And I can only imagine, with so many of the married couples that I know, that as a sense of duty creeps into relationships, as a sense of injustice creeps into relationships, and we start to resent those things that just aren't equal or right, that those burdens can be very heavy to bear. But if we allow just a little bit of love to transform those burdens, as we allow the yoke of Jesus to join us together as we're no longer just trudging through life with our responsibilities and our duties and justice, but now connected, yoked to another, we can find love. That those burdens shift and change, and that love, the love that we have for our children, the love that we have for our neighbors, the love that we might have for the alien in our land, right? As all of the Old Testament calls us to, and Jesus shows us, and the church still invites us to, as the love for a brother or sister changes, shifts our perspective, and takes away the burden, replacing it with privilege, maybe even a joy, maybe a joy in the midst of sorrow and loss. But a loss based in love is transformative because the love transforms even our loss into great meaning. So I'm not sure exactly how, in each of the circumstances of my life, much less your life, how love, how God can be embraced and joined to us in a yoke of love. But where we're able to do that, his burden is easy. His yoke easy, his burden light.